Hello and welcome to episode 3 of my Formula One career. I'm Ian, and in today's episode we do have the highlights of my very first career race here in my hometown of Melbourne, Australia. It's not really my hometown, but it's my home race, and we have got quite an exciting race ahead of us. We are starting in P6, which isn't too bad, with our teammate right down the field in 10th place. Rather interestingly though, we've got Max Verstappen behind us, Sergio Perez as well. So both of them should be, threatening us, at least at the start of the race. But as long as we can sort of keep up with Perez, we should be okay. But I'm kind of expecting Max Verstappen to pull a bit ahead, and I wouldn't be too surprised if that happens early on. The weather isn't too bad as well. We've got a nice sunny conditions here until around lap 24, something like that, when we're expecting the cloud cover to come in. We're expecting the sun to sort of pop back out again right towards the end of the race. But that should help us out. We're starting on the ultra soft tyres. We're going to be going to lap 13. Then we're going on to the super softs. Then on lap 34, we'll pit once more for the final time and go back onto the super softs once more. So we're doing a two-stopper. Ultra softs, super soft, super soft. That's the plan. We're also putting in slightly less fuel than perhaps we normally do, just to sort of keep things a little bit more interesting on the race start, because we do need a great start if we're to have any chance of picking up a good finish here in Australia, because overtaking is very, very difficult, as you can probably imagine. So going around on the formation lap, of course, we are following our compatriot Daniel Ricciardo, who is starting alongside us. We've got Max Verstappen starting on the super soft tyres. So that gives us a little bit of an opportunity to at least stay ahead of him for maybe a lap or two, which could help towards the end of the race, because, of course, we're on the quicker tyre. But we will have to wait and see on that one. So as we start the lineup, we're going to watch for the 5 red lights to extinguish, and then we will be underway. We're just waiting for those final few cars at the back of the grid to get into formation, and we are lights out here in Australia. So not a bad getaway there. We did have a reprimand, a warning for a collision with Perez. Now what actually happened, I'll actually show the replay. You can see that Perez came right up and just sort of pushed his nose up the back of our gearbox and sort of almost pushed us into a collision with, I think that was Hamilton there. So we were very, very lucky that there was no more damage done. But of course that did allow Verstappen to squeeze around onto the outside. And then we settled down into 7th place behind Verstappen, who was already starting to pull away a little bit, with Sergio Perez behind us. So we skip ahead now to lap 11, where you may just be able to see in the rearview mirrors Sergio Perez has dived into the pits. He was closing down at quite a rate of knots because I'm starting to really struggle on these ultra soft tyres. I must have sort of been wearing through them a little bit quicker than the Force India, because he's dived into the pits but closed that gap quite considerably. So we've got a 5-second lead over Grosjean now, but Verstappen is a long way up the road, and in fact you can't even see him for most of the lap now. You do just sort of get glances of him here and there, but that puts us into a little bit of position because we've been in lean fuel mix for the whole length of this sort of stint, really. I mean, we started on standard at race start, and then we dropped down to lean to get our fuel mix back into the positive. So now we've bumped it back up to standard, so we can hopefully sort of push with our with some decent lap times. But as you can see, we're pulling away a little bit from Grosjean, but not enough, because what I'm worried about is when Perez comes back out, there is a good opportunity for an undercut for him. So we're going to try and ward that off, because we're not diving into the pits until lap 13, which is exactly what we're going to cut to now. Here we are in lap 13 then, as we go around coming up to the pit stop. As you can see in that final corner, we just run a little bit wide, so we go into the pits. There goes Grosjean past us on the main straight. He's staying out on the ultra soft tyres for a very long time. Same with Esteban Ocon, Perez's teammate. And then there's a whole host of cars coming up on this whilst we're going through the pits. Here you can see all the cars on the main straight overtaking us, because these are all the guys that started on the super softs. You've got Sainz, Alonso, Kvyat, Magnussen's still out on the ultra softs, and there goes Perez off in the distance. That's how far behind we are. So staying out an extra couple of laps didn't really work for us, but rather importantly, we did come out ahead of Ericsson, so we don't have to worry about overtaking him. And then you've got, I'm assuming is Van Dorn, because Alonso's further up the road, and then our teammate Hulkenberg is even further behind. You can just see him in the rearview mirrors, and Hulkenberg actually pitted, I believe it was a lap before us. So that works out well for us. So we've still got a bit of work to do. We're 15th place, and of course we've sort of in terms of aggregate, we're sort of -1 because Perez is ahead of us at the moment. Now what's important is getting out and burning through some really good lap times here, because when Grosjean comes into the pits on the ultra softs, that allows us the opportunity to potentially maintain that 5-second lead, because we've had some pretty sloppy in-lap there before the pits. So we do need to get our hammer down a little bit to prevent Grosjean from getting us on the pit stop. But as we come up to start lap 15, towards the end of lap 14, you can see there's 3 cars, Perez right behind, Lance Stroll and Kevin Magnussen, who are too wide going into that final corner. And so we're just sort of holding off a little bit. We've got a little bit of slipstream from Perez, but as you can see, that's Magnussen pulling over to the right-hand side. It looks like he's got a puncture or some problems, so he's pulled over onto the grass. We do get the yellow flag, but of course it doesn't affect us too much. But of course, Kevin Magnussen coming out, we did get a green flag, so we could resume racing, but unfortunately the safety car gets deployed and we get stuck with having to maintain our delta. So we have to maintain that equal distance from Perez, and that will come back to hurt us quite catastrophically. With Magnussen out of the race, obviously the safety car was needed because he's parked up right on the pit exit, and they obviously deem it unsafe, and his car needs to be moved from the grass there right at the end of the main straight just before turn 1. So as we slowly ease our way around the circuit, we come back around, and all the cars that haven't pitted yet are now diving into the pits. So it works out well for Romain Grosjean, who stayed out on the Ultrasoft, same with Ocon and that sort of stuff. As we do gain a couple of places, we move back ahead of Ocon, but there is Grosjean there coming out of the pits. So us having to maintain that delta allows Romain Grosjean to squeeze ahead of us coming out of the pits. It was very lucky for Haas, but not so lucky for us. So we're now stuck down in 12th place, and we've got a lot of work to do to get back into the points. You join me on lap 17 now, as we're just about to get restarted here after the safety car period. As you can see, all the cars are back. I don't know who it is that's leading this race, but whoever it is slowly backing us back and putting the pack right together. But we get a very poor start because we were right in the middle of a corner when the restart happened, and so Grosjean managed to get well away from us, and we are a long way behind him, so there's no possible chance of an overtake coming into turn 1. And rather helpfully for us, It's Marcus Ericsson behind in the Sauber, so he just doesn't have that pace to keep up with us. So we are sort of in a bit of no man's land with Romain Grosjean well ahead of us and Marcus Ericsson quite a long way behind. And then behind him it's Van Dorn and then our teammate Nico Hulkenberg. But look at all these cars in front of us jostling for position. I believe that's Kvyat there with Perez and Romain Grosjean as all three of them almost side by side at one point, battling away. Now, Perez he's got the inside line and gets ahead of Danny Kvyat, but as we come around onto lap 19 now, you can see Perez has started to pull away a little bit. We've still got Romain Grosjean battling very, very hard with Kvyat. He's right up the tail of Danny Kvyat, so we're sort of backing off because there could be anything happening here, but Grosjean goes for the look on the inside and just about pays it off, but Kvyat's not yielding very quickly, so we have to be a little bit careful. We don't want to get into any sort of contact if these two fall apart. But look at that as Kvyat has to get off the accelerator, and we have to do exactly the same thing because we nearly ran into the back of Danny Kvyat there. But Romain Grosjean makes that move stick, but what rather hurt us is now Ericsson has closed down now to us with Hulkenberg right behind. Hulkenberg's managed to get ahead of Stoffel Van Dorn, and we've got sort of 5 cars here, and we're right in the middle of it at the moment. As we flash forward halfway around lap 20 now, we are right behind Danny Kvyat, so this looks like we can shape up for a potential overtake. We might not be able to make anything stick here at the back, but if we can stay close to him when we come up to the main straight, we should have DRS to allow us to squeeze past the Toro Rosso driver. But we do have to maintain that tight, close proximity to him because, of course, we're getting a little bit of filthy air, turbulent air, and so we do have to sort of pull away a little bit from him coming into those sort of penultimate corners just because we are finding it really, really difficult to follow him. Now, what you will notice in the rear view is our teammate Hulkenberg is right behind us now. He's managed to overtake Marcus Ericsson, and we just are not close enough to Danny Kvyat, who maintains 11th place, and we still sit in 12th place with our teammate now right behind us in 13th. Lap 21 now, we are still stuck behind Danny Kvyat, but rather worryingly, he's allowed our teammate Nico to be right on our tail. We've got a lot of work to do, but thankfully, Danny Kvyat dived into the pits. He started the race on the super softs, and he obviously didn't bother pitting when the safety car came out. But we are now trying to defend ferociously from Nico Hulkenberg, who it just looks like he's got much better pace than us. So now that Kvyat's pulled away out of our path, we can try and put the hammer down and get some decent laps because we are really struggling for pace, stuck behind that Toro Rosso. But we need to pull away from Nico as much as we can to prevent any sort of possible team orders, because it doesn't seem to be working as we skip forward to lap 22 now, and we're closing in to Carlos Sainz in 9th place. That's Romain Grosjean ahead of him. So Romain Grosjean's doing a fantastic race at the moment, or is Carlos Sainz just diving back? Could be that, because Carlos Sainz has now dived into the pits as well, and we are now right behind Romain Grosjean, so we're up into 9th place. So we sort of lost a couple of places because we were running 7th, remember, at the end of that first lap, which is where we sat before we went into the pits. So we've lost a couple of places. We lost out to Perez with the undercut, and then we lost out to Romain Grosjean because it was just a very, very poorly timed safety car for us. But rather worryingly, we've still got Nico right behind us, and we are actually being pushed a little bit too much. I just can't really handle him. So by lap 23, we pull aside just about. I would say it's a team order, but I sort of felt that Nico was the faster driver, so let's just let him pass. He's going to pull off into the distance. It was not a great maneuver, but what you will notice, remember that corner, because we've now got Esteban Ocon right behind us. That was partly why I thought we should let Hulkenberg go through, because Esteban Ocon could take both of us if I'm holding Nico up too much, but by letting Nico go, at least Esteban Ocon's not going to be closing up to Nico too much. So we now are still not able to just sort of relax and stretch our legs a little bit because we've got Hulkenberg right ahead of us. We closed down a lot on the DRS, but we just can't quite pull that off. And then we've got Esteban Ocon right in our wing mirrors, a whole wing mirror full of pink, and we are now wedged in the middle of 3 rather than wedged in the middle of 5. as we are starting to struggle with the turbulent air a little bit. Hulkenberg's just not pulling away as much as we thought, but as you will see, we close up coming into that sharp right turn, right corner, and what happens is I think Nico brake checked me, but as you can see, my braking marker is just a little bit later than his, and we do a minor bit of damage on the front wing. But now watch as Esteban Ocon, he seizes his opportunity. I'm trying to get in contact with the pit wall, and what happens is I've opened the door just a little bit, and Esteban Ocon, we get tangled up, and he pushes me into the wall. That is a disaster for us. That's our race done on lap 24. We're not even halfway through the race yet. There he is. Look, we've pulled right over to the side because we're getting in touch with the pit wall. Ocon seizes his opportunity. I don't see him. Ocon pushes me into the wall, and I just go straight ahead into the gravel pit, and that is our race over, unfortunately. Really disappointing considering we were doing so well up to that point, but it wasn't to be, as Valtteri Bottas takes the win. He led from the start, remember, he was on pole. If we have a look, you can see he finished ahead of the two Ferraris of Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Raikkonen. Lewis Hamilton dropped down into fourth place there, ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, Romain Grosjean, Esteban Ocon, and our teammate Nico Hulkenberg picks up the final points position in 10th place. And here's what I had to say outside in the pit paddock.
You must be absolutely gutted with what happened.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, it was. It's not a great way to finish what was shaping up to be a fantastic weekend. We had good race pace, and we were looking for a double points finish for Nico and myself. But unfortunately, that's racing. I have spoken to Esteban, and we both sort of admitted we were at fault, really, which is pretty unusual in this day and age in Formula One. But I sort of left the door open for him a little bit, and he sort of just assumed that he had the opportunity for an overtake, and it wasn't to be. So it is frustrating. It's really, really hard. I'll just have to go home and have a couple of beers, and I'll be right for the next race.
Did your team put a complaint into the race stewards?
No, they didn't. No. Again, it was a sort of equal 50-50 call, really, and the team sort of thought it wasn't really worth doing, and I didn't think it was worth doing either. So, it's just one of those things. It was a racing incident that hopefully both Esteban and myself can learn from. Thanks.